G'day and welcome. I'm Peter Bender from Bundaberg Commercial. I help people to buy and sell commercial properties and businesses, particularly those who have been looking for more than 6 months in doing such. Now, you've joined us in a small mini-series where I've actually taken some time out and run a couple of videos on sales techniques. The reason I've done that is quite often people will be looking to buy and sell a property, and it's the first time that they've done that, and you'll be coming up against a salesperson who's probably been doing it for a fair while and is well equipped. One of the challenges that people find is they get nervous in those instances. They feel that the other person may have more power than them, more knowledge than them, and they may not trust them to the extent where they think they're not getting a good deal. So by spending a few videos over the series, and you'll find them on my channel, we went through various aspects. The first video we went through was what was called the traditional or classical sales model. We've gone through a structure, which is here on this board. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it was a structure that was designed to help salespeople go through a sales process, particularly in an area where they had a product that had a lot of product knowledge. We went through the week after that. We went to a program called Getting to Yes, which was the Harvard business model. You see that in the JTY, which went through 4 key areas, which was slightly different, and how they worked it on. They looked at the fact that people were no longer the problem. We needed to recognize that the problem was the problem. They also had a look at working at interests rather than positions. So it wasn't about ego. It was more about what are the drivers that you need to have a look at. We also looked through the purpose of doing that model is it gave you a series or a variety of options. And we talked about how people in the sales area started to become known as negotiators, as problem solvers, as people who worked as part of a team to get the program organized. And the final component for what the Harvard business model was, which we spoke about last week, was in regards to having an agreement based on a set criteria of objectives. In commercial real estate, you'll find that maybe against an ROI, return on investment. It may be across benchmarks. It may be comparative analysis, that sort of concept. And we looked at that aspect. Both of those models have served mankind really well for quite a long time. I like it because it's fairly logical, it's fairly structured, there's a lot of methodology on it. But something was missing. It got to the stage where people were realizing that, there need to be people involved in it. And there's a couple of aspects where, once again, usually a major critical factor happens that changes the way that people look at things. And probably one of the prime movers is a gentleman by the name of Chris Voss, who wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. Chris was actually the front man for the movement, think of it as this way. He runs a business. He used to be a negotiator for the FBI. And the Americans, and particularly the FBI and the CIA, the guys you saw the movies on, they actually worked out that we needed a better model. And probably what really happened to it, that drove home the fact that such a model as that behind me and the Harvard business model was just too logical. The story that Chris shared is there was a hostage negotiation situation. A bank guy or a guy had gone into a bank, armed, pretty well locked everybody up, explained to the people that if he didn't get what he wanted by 3 o'clock, he was going to shoot a hostage. These scenarios are trained and drilled and unfortunately happen hundreds of times. So the FBI and the likes of those teams that work in those negotiation teams are in familiar territory. Set up in a cafe across the road, ordered donuts, got some coffees, went on the premise that one of the good things about hostage negotiations is that the hostage takers never abide by deadlines and they don't shoot hostages. The reason being is you lose leverage. If you've whole leverage is 10 hostages, why would you shoot hostages? You suddenly have less power. They got organised, got them donuts, got themselves some director chairs, started to get ready, and suddenly there's a gunshot went off. Now this is paraphrasing it, but you get the main story coming through. Suddenly there's coffee spill. People panicking. What's going on? What's going on? There's people falling over the floor. There's people running to the windows. Quick, tell us what happened. And then a second shot went off. And the world of sales and negotiation changed. What happened is at 3 o'clock, the hostage person, the hostage taker, shot one of the hostages right on schedule. First time ever in the history of the world that a hostage situation had turned like this. Absolutely sour. And then to make it even worse, the person with the gun then walked deliberately in front of the line of fire of a sniper who had no other choice but to shoot them dead. It turned out to be the world's first suicide by police, and it changed the way that the world looked at negotiations. Suddenly people realised that the model that they've been using, the logic of step by step, doesn't work in this situation. Why was that so? It was recognised that we started to lose the element of people. We started to lose the fact that not everyone's logical. Sometimes we're an emotional creature. Oh, I know you find that hard to believe, but we are actually an emotional creature. And the sales techniques and the sales models of those times and the negotiations of those times has started to fail to recognise that aspect. Now, as a background to this story, what had actually happened from memory is the hostage taker, I think, had just shot both his parents about half an hour ago, and the people who in the process of doing the negotiations weren't aware of that. So this was not a person who was in a very calm, relaxed state. So we got to the stage, okay, we need to put emotions back into negotiations. And that's where Chris Voss has done a lot of his work, and a lot of his team, and a lot of the group work. It's just that Chris happens to be the guy on YouTube, and he's quite easy to watch and listen to and to read, and gets the message across. I've been working on this book probably for about 6 months now. I've mentioned before that I've had the privilege of going through several processes of sales and techniques to continue to craft my skill, to find better ways to help people. And there's some really good stories, and a lot of it is based on the fact that Chris looks at the emotional side of negotiations. Not everything in that book would I say I agree with, and it may actually be that the jury is more still out at this particular point of time rather than disagreeing with it. I've tried a lot of these techniques and some of the skills he's got. He goes very much into almost the old way of doing sales, in that there's a lot of tactics, a lot of twists, a lot of subtleties, rather than big broad steps that you go through. There's a lot of minute training aspects. One of the things that he challenges that makes different, and this may give you an indication if you're dealing with someone who's working on the very nouveau approach of never split the difference type negotiations, is in sales, we used to get taught to get people to say yes. We want them to proceed. Would you like that car now? Yes. Is orange the color you prefer? Yes. That sort of type mentality. And we used to drill people into saying, get 3 yeses and then close the sale. If you got 3 yeses, then run with it. Chris flipped that on its head. He goes on the philosophy that you need to get people to say no. The reason he wants people to say no is because they are more comfortable. When you say yes, quite often you feel like you're being boxed into a corral. You feel like you're being led by a salesperson. You feel like you're no longer in control of the situation. Whereas if you say no, you've got that warm, fuzzy feeling. You've got your arms across your chest. You feel comfortable. You feel in control. No one's going to move you from that position. Chris is of the philosophy that you want people to be in that position. Once you can get them into being relaxed and comfortable, then you can start to work with them. It's harder to work with them when they're saying yes. And he says there's 3 types of yeses. There's a true yes, there's a counterfeit yes, and there's a lie yes. That sort of concept. So he really doesn't like the word yes at all. What I'll talk about today in particular is one of the things that Chris talks about is there are 3 personality types. And this is something that I have been trying to work with and get my head around. And it is challenging, but it's scaringly realistic. There's all sorts of methodologies on putting people in boxes. We've got introverts and extroverts. You've got tall people and short people. You've got people born in the northern hemisphere, people born in the southern hemisphere. Mankind is comfortable when people are in boxes, and personality types is something since the 1950s again, in regards to universities that looked at Myers-Briggs type personalities, that look at DISC personalities. There's all sorts of different aspects. There's 3 personality types that Chris uses, and one is called an analyst. Now, an analyst will be the type of person that we would portray almost like a lawyer, almost like an accountant, almost like a chess player. You would think that I'm a type of analyst, but the analysts drive me nuts. Now, I don't know if it's birds of a feather just trying to kill each other, or if we're just totally opposite. I'm still trying to get my head around that. But for an analyst, they're very methodical, very logical. And what's interesting is they have a different sense of time. They will not proceed to the next question, to the next item of agenda, until they've totally satisfied with that criteria. And I've had some very difficult negotiations to work with, not difficult from the people, but the fact that I've needed to cautiously and patiently wait for people to process what they need to do. And there is quite often the case that they get into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller issues. So they get, for someone like me who looks big pictures and macros, to start talking about the width of the screw has, to me, absolutely no relative. But to an analyst, they won't go to the next step until they answer that exact question, and they know exactly the design specs of the size of that screw and what it's made of and how it works on. So it's an interesting challenge to work with. I share this information with you for 2 reasons. One, you may start to understand which of the 3 personality or negotiation types you are, and also to recognize it in the person that you're negotiating with. So have a look at those concepts. Some of the other parts that are of interest for an analyst is they're all about getting the right results. They're not really worried about image. They're not really caring if they've got a great deal. They just want to make sure that it's the right deal. They hate surprises, which is a difficult challenge, especially in a complex environment. There may be a lot of information in a commercial deal or a business deal, and the salesperson at times needs to work out how to pace it. And with an analyst, you've got to be careful not to provide surprises. You need to let them know earlier rather than later if there's issues that you think they may have a challenge with. So surprises are something they don't like. But look, no one likes surprises. They could research for 2 weeks rather than talk for 15 minutes. Another thing as an analyst, quite often we'll work on emails. I get some people just refuse to talk to me on a telephone. And look, I'm a nice guy. No, everything has to be on email so they can trace it and they can look back and they can verify it and they can cross-check it and they can tick off the box to make sure it works on there. I've had people spend weeks and weeks analysing a proposal, say to buy a business, and they're yet to get out of their office and look at the business. To me, it blows my mind because I'm almost totally opposite. I'm a sensate. If I have a client wants me to look at working with them to sell a business or to buy a business for them, the first thing I do is I go out there. I want to see the machinery. I want to hear the voices. I want to smell the dust. I want to be kicking the metal on the floor. I want to be seeing how the machines operate. I want to work out how the computer programs are. It's all about the senses for me, not with an analyst. An analyst will look at everything, particularly the financials. They'll do counsel searches. They'll talk with their lawyers. They'll look at benchmarks. Everything they can possibly do, it seems like, but go and look at the business or the property. So you just got to be patient and recognize that that's the way they are. You're not going to change them. And if you're in that category, just recognize that you may frustrate people, but you're not going to change yourself. So just bear with it and keep it balanced. They are fairly skeptical. You probably best not to give them too many questions at the front end because they're all processing. Their mind is all about getting answers. It's not about providing answers. Is an area to have a look at it. You need to give them silence. You need to give them time to think. Their concept of time is totally different. If I haven't heard from one of my analyst type clients for 2 or 3 weeks, I no longer sweat it. I know that quite often, increasingly, that is normal, especially if it's a big deal. I might drop them a line or an email, but yeah, I won't be sitting there thinking they've gone away. With other personality types, if you haven't heard in 3 hours, you can almost guarantee that person's gone walkies, found something else, done a Dora from Finding Nemo? Oh, something shiny, and off they go over there. Some people you just need to keep ringing to get them back off something shiny and focus on the project. The second personality type he looks at are accommodators. Yeah, I like these ones. Accommodators is someone who values relationships. They will actually do negotiations. They're the type of person who will quite often do a quid pro quo. I'll give you something in return for you give me something. They're all about making sure that it's more important that the relationship between you and me is strong. If we don't do a deal, we don't do a deal. We'll do one next time. We'll do a one later on, which is better suited for us. It's all about the people. It really is the warm, fuzzy type stuff. Yeah, no, it doesn't sound like me, and I scratch my head sometimes, but that may just be the evolution of Peter Bender the man. Time is well spent for an accommodator. They will be quite comfortable to have meetings, have coffee, have lunch. I had lunch with a client of mine. We will probably not do work for, I don't know, about 6 months or so. But to me and to him, it was time really well spent. More pragmatic people, no, I'm not dealing with anything until they're ready to sign the check and they're ready to do the work. Accommodators are different in the way that they value time and the way that they value relationships. Easily distractible, poor time managers. The trick with those who are accommodators, you need to keep them focused on what's the next thing, what's the next step. So once you've worked out that lunchtime meeting, we sat down and said, okay, so what do we do next? Okay, my friend David in this instance was going to get me some figures and get that organised. We had a good time, lots of laughs, shared stories, and we now know that the next step is for him to send me some details so we can start to work out some pricing. That's the trick to working with accommodators. And if you're an accommodator, make sure you've always got an objective for the meeting so that if nothing else, you've walked out with that objective satisfied. Because an accommodator quite easily come out of the meeting and say, oh, forgot to ask him about this. That's why we met in the first place. Because, hey, it's almost like a Smurf movie. Tra-la-la-la-la, we're all happy. These are accommodators. Then we have assertives. Now, assertives is pretty well just what it explains. And I have had plenty of time these last couple of months working with 2 clients in particular who are incredibly, I wouldn't even say assertive. They are aggressive. They are hostile. The first thing you need to recognize about an assertive is they do not care about relationships. They are quite happy to burn you right here and then as long as they get the deal. For them, it's all about winning. Now, we could be philosophical and say there's a right and there's a wrong, or we could be pragmatic and say this is the way they are, we need to work with it. So how do you work with an assertive? There are 2 techniques that Chris works with. One is he talks about mirroring. Now, you may be familiar with mirroring from a body language point of view. Alan Pease, I think, first started off the concept of mirroring, and then some more people who worked in the body language space worked it off. So if someone crosses their arms, you cross your arms. You know, if someone leans their head to the left, you lean your head to the left. If someone sits down and crosses their legs, then you sit and cross your legs. The reason you physically mirror someone is it makes them think that, oh, you're like me, and they get a little bit more relaxed. Now, you've got to be careful not to be clunky and make it manipulative. You will probably find that you will naturally fall into the body language of your other person anyway. If you've got a situation where an assertive has got their arms closed, well, then start with your arms closed, but then open it up a little bit. And you'll probably find that they will also open up. Because one of the things with having your arms closed, you can't breathe. you find the assertive is talking lots. By the time, if you open up your arms a little bit or put one hand in your pocket, then they will do the same, which allows them to expand their chest, starts to bring their adrenaline rush down. They'll still continue to vomit all over you and tell you how bad you are and what's going on, but they'll start to slow down a little bit. And this is where you use other mirroring aspects. You may do things like paraphrasing. You may use the same tone as them. You've got to be a little bit careful. I have actually gone aggressive with an aggressive person because it had to be done and it was a calculated risk. If you do that with an assertive or aggressive person, odds are that the deal will crash because they'll feel threatened. They're no longer sensing themselves as the top dog in the fight. So you need to be very careful. You choose your battles wisely, as they say. Other things is breathing patterns. You know, if they're breathing shortly, well, do you want to breathe short as well, or do you want to breathe longer with them? Using the terminologies that they have. You know, for argument's sake, I'm not paying you what your money is worth. What I'm worth? Yeah, it would be a mirror aspect. Yeah, I'm not doing this because you've said this and this, and you know, the sky is blue. Sky's blue is how I'd respond. Yeah, the sky's blue because, you know, etc. And, you know, and then we're gonna probably go fishing and get cake. Yeah, all right, get cake. And then by then they have exhausted their exuberance, for want of a better word. And then you can start to work on negotiating. Remember, this is a way of looking at the emotional side of sales. And these are some of the techniques that you come up in Never Split the Difference. Other things with assertives, it's all about self-image. It's all about winning. There's lots of salespeople who are assertives, unfortunately, particularly those who are poorly trained. You see it there. They've got the fantastic hair. They've got the fantastic Armani suit. They've got the almighty Maserati. It doesn't suit my style, so sorry for the millions of people out there who are watching this who are in that sort of category. But you recognise that they're the people you deal with. And when you're in a situation of negotiating for yourself, if you can recognise the assertive and understand why they do the things they do, they don't care about you, they care about winning. They have no concept of time. It has to be done right here, right now. It's all about power. It's all about aggression. When you can understand the game you're playing, you will play it a lot better. And this is the purpose of these videos that I work on. And anything else? Interestingly, respect is most important to them. They may not give respect, but it's all about receiving respect. That's right. Works on egos. They will tell you rather than ask you. If you are silent with an assertive, that is language to them to fill the space with something else. So a good challenge for negotiating with an assertive is think about what you're going to say, wait for the opportunity, and then say it, get in there. Otherwise, that they will keep talking on. They're great at it. It drives you nuts. You'll be hours in there. Mirror them. Calibrated questions is another term that they use a lot of. So if they say, I'm not paying that much price, you're not worth that much money. How much money do you think I'm worth? How would you work out the value of the money that we're looking for? If you don't want to pay that much price, how are you comparing that with something else? These are the types of calibrated questions that you can have a look at. Calibrated questions is part of the way that you can get control back in a conversation against an assertive. That's probably the three things that we have. I like the story of Never Split the Difference as how he got the title. I sort of go back a little bit. The concept is that Chris Voss comes from a world of international hostage negotiation, and people who never split the difference and use that methodology tend to be tough negotiators. Have a look at last week's video about dealing with tough negotiators, a slightly different model but the same sort of concept. Chris would go with a story similar, paraphrasing it. If we had 4 hostages, you can't split the difference. It's not a case of, okay, you shoot 2 and give me 2, we'll split the difference and call it quits. It doesn't work like that. And with that sort of mentality is how Chris has gone into developing the new way of negotiating. It's bringing back in the emotional aspect of people, bringing back in how you can identify what the person's needs are from an emotional point of view as well as a logical point of view. putting these mixes together is quite a challenge. The issue that I have is trying not to have a model that's too big. It still needs to be very small and simple. It'd be a little bit clunky. Some of my customers may even see me trying to use some of these techniques as I try to get them better to find a better way to solve problems and help solutions. It's a lot of fun. It's been around for about 5 years now. You'll see more of it coming through. And I think it'll be a good thing to recognize that at the end of the day, people are people. And I often say, what were they thinking at the time of making that decision? Oh, that's right. They weren't thinking at all. But that's okay. That's normal. And if you understand the sales process and things like never split the difference, things like getting to yes from the Harvard model, things like the classical sales structure that we also spoke about, you will find yourself knowing more than 90% of salespeople. So spend some time over these 3 videos. Give me some comments on things that you've tried, things that you've noticed that may not even been talked about. It's a lot of fun. It helps you to work out things, keeps you sane, keeps you alive. In the meantime, till next week, take care and God bless.